All right, welcome back to another episode of the newly named Second Alarm podcast, and we got a very amazing guest today, Tarry Summers, who is a pretty big player in the Columbus market. If you guys don't know who he is, he's probably one of the most, I would say, one of the most well-known local guys that's doing some pretty big things. I think you've got, I think the last time I knew of a number mentioned was 300 plus single-family homes, and then you've got obviously the pros gym that you have locally here and several other businesses going on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for that intro. Hopefully, well known means good.
Absolutely.
But yeah, actually, I sold a bunch of stuff the beginning of last year, which was like couldn't have really timed it up better.
Yeah.
I had to sell more, but yeah, we're down like right around like 240 units now.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's I was telling you kind of
we got some small apartments left, but yeah.
Yeah, and I was saying before we started was that, like both being in the Columbus area, I mean, I don't think that you probably ever hear it, but I hear it from people like time and time, or I shouldn't say time and time again. Occasionally, like I said, when I meet with them, is that like, hey, you and Terry ought to get together, or hey, do you know Terry? And I'm like, we've never, so everybody knows, we've never officially met in person. I think we've talked on the phone once several years ago, and then we've stayed in contact on social media, and I love poking fun at some of your stuff, and you love doing it. At least you maybe don't love it, but I've got the firehouse sense of humor in me is we're very I just love busting people's balls and whatnot. So it's always fun for me to do that. But that's one thing that I wanted to kind of, I guess, get together and talk about is because you've got the sign behind you, Scalers Only. Like, you have a really great podcast that's come out recently that talks about business development and how you can really scale what you're doing. And I think that that's something that I always tell people when they bring it up, because most people, when they bring it up to me, it's like single family versus multifamily. We do traditionally apartments or commercial real estate development, and you're known for being single family and residential. And I always tell them, I'm like, you're missing the whole point. Like, the point is focus on whatever you're doing and scale that. And at scale, you can bring in these other businesses like management. You have construction. You have all these other things that brings you cash today. Versus, like, in my world, equity is great, but it doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't pay the bills. Yeah, I mean, so you got to have those things going on. And I love it because you started in the single family world, and you're probably one of the only, I think there's only like a couple of groups that are outside of like being institutional grade folks that are in Columbus. But I mean, as far as like I would consider like local, I can only think of you and maybe one or two other groups that are to the size, that have scaled to the size that you are.
Yeah. It's a unique business model, man. I first got into this having no idea how to scale anything, and that wasn't really my intention. It's just houses, kind of knew it. It's, we live in houses growing up, and you look at apartments and some of these bigger buildings, and there's this mindset piece between it. But then you get into it, and you're like, okay, I can own 100% of this house if I could scale it. It's the same thing as running a giant apartment complex. And if you're a path of progress, your appreciation, you get it both ways. You get it on the cash flow and the income approach and on the sales comparison approach. So I look at it, kind of twofold, like, hey, I'm getting appreciation kind of double if I buy right in the right areas, kind of have some view of the future. But yeah, man, everyone gets in that debate, like apartments, single family. And I'm like, who cares? Like at the end of the day, does it make money? I made this funny TikTok, and
I was dying.
Right?
I was dying. That was great.
All these apartment guys are like, hey, man, I got 68,000 units. And I'm like, cool, man. That's great. Like, I'm happy for you. And they're like, they own like a 0.5% or like 2%. I'm like, dude, I could say I own Apple. I could say I own Tesla because I'm a shareholder. Like, at that point, you're a shareholder. You're not an owner. So it just, I don't know. I'm all for other people's success, man. I love it, but don't hate on other people's success and how they find it either.
Yeah, and I think that first of all, I would 100% agree with you, right? I mean, 90% of the people out there, if they're like, hey, I've got seven. I mean, there's big national guys that have a ton of eyeballs on them, or have big mastermind groups, and they've got 4,000, 5,000, 7,000 doors. But like you said, if you whittle it down to what's their ownership percentage, it's actually low. But I would say, like, for us is scaling into multifamily, the first few deals where I owned 70% of it, right? I mean, I didn't have the money to buy one myself, own 100% of it in the beginning, but it allowed me to scale quickly to where we could create a management company. We could create a construction company. There's a lot of people that aren't doing that. So like, I have a different lens on it. I think that, at this point, you could go out and buy if you bought 3,000 apartments, whether you own all of them or not, the revenue that can be generated by you using that as a tool to build other businesses can be huge. But if you're like a lot of syndicators that are, they're just going from deal to deal to deal, earning money on an acquisition fee. They may or may not really care how the deal does at the end. I mean, that's our benchmark is, no matter how much you own of it or you don't own of it, are the people getting the returns that you told them they would? Is it performing the way that you said it would? And that's really how we measure the success. I mean, like you said, the door count to me it's interesting because that's what everybody focuses on, and that's how people
It
sell their
sounds sexy.
lines. Or yeah, I mean, it's like
And
I got all
you
this stuff, but I've
get
talked
these
to people that
industrial
are
guys, you get these industrial guys like, yeah, I got 1 million square feet, and you're like, okay, in North Carolina where no one goes, like it doesn't matter, right? It's like, hey, does it make money? Does it work for your lifestyle? And is it really what you want? And so if that's the case, then great, man. I mean, there's people that, I mean, there's always that 10 grand a month. If I can just make 10 grand a month, right? And I'm sure that every single person that's listening to this, when you first started, you probably had that same thought in your head too. And you're like, I can just get 10 grand a month, right? And then you do, and it's like, oh, and then that's a great lifestyle business, right? Where you can kind of pay your bills and do all that. But then it's like, hey, if you want to scale and do more, then you actually have to build an actual business. So it's just all what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I like, maybe we would talk about that is, I know a lot of people that follow you or listen to you regularly know your story, but, maybe walk me through like how did this become just an idea, what were you doing before real estate altogether? And then how did that become like an idea in your head? And how did you put that idea into action where you actually bought your first house or you bought your first 5 houses, like, or, how did that look for you?
For sure, man. So I was actually in the fitness industry back in the day. I was an exercise physiology major. And so that basically means you get to be a personal trainer for the rest of your life, which I thought was pretty cool until, you realize you got to go sell and promote yourself and all this. And so I ended up working for a company called Urban Active. Had no idea how to sell, but it was a job, sales job. And it was $300 every 2 weeks. And I'm like, well, student loans are $810 a month. That's at least $600. If I sell just a couple things, I can pay my student loans and shack up on a couch, but anyways, I got decent, I should say. I got decent at sales, but I just had to outwork everybody else. So I would take like all like the 5 a.m., 6 a.m. appointments that people didn't want to show up to. Then I would also take like all the 9, 10 o'clock appointments because no one wanted to show up to those either, which basically meant you worked all damn day. I realized after about a year of doing this that I was drained, man. I couldn't do it. And I met a lady who I sold personal training to, who was a big real estate agent in town. She's like, you should invest in real estate. Now's the best time ever. This is 2010. And I'm like, man, the economy's bad. Like, what traditional people here, like, economy's bad, sucks. Shouldn't invest in real estate. But when I started looking at it, there were houses that were selling for, $100,000 that would sell for, $150,000 only 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm like, okay, maybe we're onto something here. So I bought my first house. Was this 2010 as like an FHA house hack, 3.5% down. So I put down like $5,500, I think it was, which was like, it basically cleared out my bank account. And then I had to go and make the rest of the money for the rehab. But I did a lot of the rehab myself. So, painted the trim, power washed the house, did the landscaping, all that types of stuff. But ended up after 6 months, I went back to the bank and did a cash out refinance on that house. So I bought it for $79,423, put my $5,500 down. So I only owed like 75 at that point. And then when I went back to the bank, it was worth 128,000. So then they let me get a loan for 101,600 bucks at 80% LTV, minus the 75 I owed. I got a check for like 27 grand, which as a 24-year-old kid that's never seen money,
it's huge.
like, it's massive, man. So and then I just saved up, man. The first 5 houses, it was, hey, if I knew I could save up 10 grand, I could find a way to buy a house with either hard money, with 10%, or I could figure out that whole thing. And then, being able to constantly cash out, refinance every little 10, 20 grand all the time, and then keep living broke throughout that process. I mean, I bought my first 16 houses that way. Driving around in my S10 and, not having payments, had roommates too, just paying my payments. So just a combination of just sucking it up, not having bills, and figuring out this cash out refi and that whole game too. So,
yeah, I think that's great that you think about where would you be at if you would have done those cash out refis early on and spent the money and not reinvested it into yourself or into your portfolio, like where would you have been, right? Because you've been right back at square one where you have no money. You may have a cool watch, or you have a car, or you have whatever it is that you wanted to spend it on, but then you have no money to go out and buy another house. And I think
Right.
that's, like you said, you kept living broke during that starting phase. And, and I love it because a lot of people probably, that know you or follow you, look at your successes today, and they immediately want that, right? They don't understand. They weren't there 10 years ago or 12 years ago now, when you were the guy that was working at Urban Active, sleeping on people's couches, doing the first one in there, doing the work yourself. All they see is what's today. So,
Yeah,
I
dude,
love
it's
that
like
you.
it's the iceberg thing. It's like, or the where they have the podium. You're standing on the first place podium, but then they don't see all the work and everything else that goes into it. I mean, it's with investors, athletes, everything. No one sees the actual behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, I mean that, and that's really, I think, what people don't talk about enough on social media is, they see the successes, and even people in our industry that are doing syndications or doing, like there's people I know all the time that are speaking on national stages at these different meetups or these different events. And I've talked to people that are in their deals as limited partners, and they're like, this guy's never paid me once for the deal that I'm in. Like he made all these
Dude, I've
promises
seen
to me.
stories, man.
I thought
Yeah.
that this is how it was going to perform. And then they got into it and they realized they shouldn't have bought it, or maybe they overpaid for it, or they adjusted the CapEx budget so that way the returns looked a certain way. But then they got in and then they're actually like, oh, instead of 500,000, it's 800,000, and they need more money, or
Then you
it's
got to go raise 300 G's. See,
yeah.
and you know what, man? Going back to this house versus apartment thing, I was at the International Single Family Rental Conference. I actually spoke there in December. There was very few these mid-level, they call mid-level owners, from 100 to 1,000 units.
Mm-hmm.
I maybe met and shook hands with. There was probably 4 or 5 of us. Other than that, it was mom and pop or institutions.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is, the amount of hedge funds that are coming into the single family space because you can't get a good deal. I mean, I don't say you can't. You obviously get good deals, but it's a lot more difficult to grab good deals in other asset classes as opposed to single family.
Right.
And if you go to other countries, Europe, Australia, anywhere else in the world, the house is worth so much more than even it is in America in comparison to incomes. So I don't even think we've scratched the surface yet on what's going to happen to housing, and that's why I'm kind of all invested into it. Is you haven't even seen the hedge fund effect yet. They all
Mm-hmm.
pulled out 6 months ago with interest rates going up. So I think it's a unique asset class. You can scale it. And what I thought was interesting about that conference is that every institution, anybody with money, are buying houses.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you've talked about it. First of all, congratulations on having speaking at that event. I mean, that's not a small accomplishment to be recognized at an event of that size and of that. I mean, that's awesome. So congrats, man. I saw you had posted about that. I thought that was really cool.
Thank you.
That you've created such an amazing thing that they recognize you at an event like that. So that's pretty awesome. But to your point, yeah, I mean, I don't know that we've even seen what it's going to look like with the hedge funds that have come in. And I mean, I know you talk about some specific ones, but that are coming into the Columbus area, coming into some of these other markets, and they're buying up these homes in mass amounts. And it's going to get to a point where they can control, I think, the national market when it comes to housing, because it all is going to depend. They can control basically the amount of houses that are on the market. They can, they can have that effect on things, which is just crazy to think about. And your average homeowner, your average W-2 worker, your average person doesn't think of it that way, but you're seeing it firsthand as this is unfolding, and they're just swallowing up these houses.
And you're already seeing it now, where certain, even in our backyard, Columbus, you're seeing the rental markets being manipulated now. Where they bought these houses in 2016, they only need X amount return. Hey, instead of us pushing to $1,500 on this, we're just going to put it up for $1,100 and undercut the market. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, and because they own so much of the market, those guys that bought in the last 3 years can't compete. And this is brand new. I mean, this just happened, over the last 30, 45 days. So it's going to be a little crazy. I think what we continue to see to happen. I'm excited to be a part of history. That's for sure. But I want to be on the right side of it.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and we see it in like the apartment space where like we were in a deal. It was, what was it? It was Columbus address. It was Dublin schools. It was like $52 million offer that we made, but our numbers were like solid. They were hard. I mean, we spent like weeks on putting it together with CapEx, everything. It was like 320 units. and a group out of New York came in and they paid cash, and they paid like 2 or 3 million over what made sense. I mean, it was like, there's no way, other than their cost of capital being way less than ours,
Yeah.
that it made sense. And post closing, and 6 months later, I was talking with the broker from Walker Dunlop who sold the deal. They basically said, hey, they came in, they paid cash, they're planning on holding it for a couple of years, they're going to refi, but because of the way their fund is orchestrated, they can overpay in the Columbus market because it's a strong market, and then they'll find deals in other maybe less performing markets, or maybe in not like A-class markets, like I would consider Columbus being that way. And they can basically supplement, they're overpaying here, but they're going to find a really good deal, 2 or 3 of them, to make up the difference. And so that's how they're able to overpay. And I'm like, see,
then they play the appreciation play with the Columbus stuff, with what's happening here. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just makes it tough. I mean, that's it's similar. Like, you're seeing like something similar like in single family in Columbus. I wouldn't have thought that, but they're manipulating the pricing, because again, it makes, when they buy something like that and they way overpay, it all of a sudden, it ripples out into other apartment communities as they start to go up for sale. And then they're comping things, or they're looking at cap rates. It's like, being a local guy, I'm like, I would not pay $120,000 a door for that place, because I know where it's at. I know the people that are going to want to live there. But these groups don't care, and they're playing by different rules. And it's interesting. Like, it's a headache for us. So I'm surprised that you're seeing that in single family. That's interesting to hear.
Yeah, it's wild, man. It's just, we're there was that big thing with apartments where institutions came in and started buying all these apartment buildings. It used to be a mom and pop business till about the the 60s and 70s. And now with technology, internet, virtual showings, virtual assistants, this whole management side of it, not having to physically be there, you're seeing, hey, we can do this on the single family side too.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think institutions have realized, I mean, American Homes for Rent owns God knows how many homes now. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So in your, as you kind of scaled, you got started. I mean, I know that there's obviously to go through all the years that it took for you to get where you're at would be longer than we have here today. But, if you could think of a pivotal time in your life that drastically changed the direction that you feel like in your growth, whether it was personal or within business, like, what would that look like?
Like something that, so question being something that was most pivotal.
Yeah, I mean, like something like, for me, like, if I put my journey on a whiteboard, I could tell you, like, hey, this person, I had a relationship with this person, and this is what, it impacted me or changed the trajectory of what I was doing,
Yeah.
and it put me over here. And then in that situation, I met somebody else, or something else happened, and the way I handled it, it changed my trajectory to go over, like, how do you, like, in your life, what does that look like for you in both life and in personal and business?
I would say, especially the real estate journey, one thing that sticks out is, it was, I mean, I have my resignation letter to Chase in April 12, 2013, where I owned 16 houses, bought 16 in a triplex in one day, closed on them, got a little liquored up the night before, went in and quit. That was obviously a very pivotal moment in my career.
Yeah.
Like, there's no going back, man. And then, what's unique about the buy and hold business is, we were talking about this off air, is you can't pay your bills with equity, and because these equity events only happen so sporadically and so often, it takes, in single family, you can get it down to 6 months, sometimes 3 months if you're, just selling the property as opposed to refi. But, sometimes you're waiting years for these big equity events. You got to pay your bills in the meantime. So I actually went to my first, like, I would say, true paid event with one of my mentors, Mark Evans. And he was talking about how, I'm like, man, if I could just get like 30 or 40 grand a month gross coming in wholesale, he's like, dude, that's easy. What are you doing? He's like, and just the mindset shift of having cash flow coming in different intervals within my business. You can't just buy and hang on to everything.
Right.
If you don't have a backing, right? If you don't have this large fund behind you. So when I learned, hey, I can actually sell some of these places and then buy, a hell of a lot more properties in the same amount of time than if I just tried to just hold on to everything, it actually helps my business by selling some stuff off here and there. That was like a huge mindset shift for me. And had I not paid 5 G's and went to his event and had that mindset breakthrough, who knows where I'd be, right? And then after that, this was like 2018, started paying for mentors. And that was like, I know as cliche as it sounds, like, oh, you got to pay for mentors, you got to pay for all this. It's like, dude, yeah, to have those breakthroughs sometimes, yeah, you got to pay. When you pay attention. And that was, for me, being able to add different revenue streams into my business was freaking game changer, man. Game changer.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm with you on I think that I agree that you got to pay, like you know, for you to be really committed to whatever it is that you're going to go learn, you got to pay for it. I mean, and that's whatever that looks like. But I think for me, like the hardest thing is like figuring out who's legit and who's not, right? Because I mean, I know and you've made comments about it. We've kind of jokingly poked back and forth about it, but like that's the hardest thing is like, if you're legit, you're up against all these other people that are not, and it's like, how do you separate yourself from that?
Because they get to spend, yeah, they get to spend their entire day marketing, creating content, and all this other stuff because their main income source is education, whereas our main income source is made in our business.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
and that's why, like I know we've talked about, you're not. I know several people are like the DM family and around Mark Evans. I've never met Mark. I've talked to him on the phone a couple of times. Like, again, is knowing some of the people that are in the room, I can vet whether or not the person's real or not, or whether it's just another, fake. How do you want to say fake, but you know what I mean? Like it's not legit. I mean, it's not, they're not actual operators. They're not actually doing what they say they're doing, right? They're making money by selling the education, and they're not actually the ones that have
They just
actually
make up
done it.
numbers. Yeah, they just make up
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah. I mean, and so, so it's great that you've attributed some of your growth and your success to that. Cause I think that's a huge thing. So what about like personally, like as far as, has there been like you talked about mentors, has there been a personal mentor that you think that has, or someone in your life that impacted you that either, like what made you be the guy at Urban Active early in the mornings taking those appointments, or like where did that come from? Like,
Yeah, for sure, man. Dude, I don't even know if I've said this on a podcast before, but looking back at it, my father was my saving grace, man. Like, I mean, we grew up like kind of the rich kid on the street, but in, the F school district type thing. But
right.
my dad, I mean, he was, there with, every game, paid for other kids to be able to play on our team. Like, dude, he did everything. He was a very, very involved in the community that we grew up in. Just a stellar human being. But he was always that guy. It's like spit on it and growl, run through a brick wall. Put your head down, never quit, never give up. And so, I took a lot of that from him. But as I've gotten through I guess, and used that to my advantage in this real estate business, one of the things I've learned is this Gen Z has this thing where, hey, there's a door over here, kind of open it and go through the door. Like if you can't run through the brick wall, like go find the cheat code.
Uh-huh.
And to me, it's like, I love the fact that I have my dad, but I also love the fact that I'm open now to other mentors who are showing me other doors that I can go through and use that same tenacity to go run through the next brick wall and then find the next mentor to go, that's going to help me open the next door.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, my dad, man, that guy is, I mean, he's my best friend, and I attribute a lot of my success to him. What's cool now is now that we have this construction company, we're partnered up on that, and we've kind of brought that into because we became entrepreneurs kind of around the same time, right around like the 2012. Yeah, 2011, 2012. He was in the carpet industry as a carpet salesman, got laid off, recession, that whole thing. And, kind of just went on his own, tried to figure out how to make money. So, we've kind of grown together through this whole journey, which has been cool. And now in the last, year and a half to be able to partner up in some capacity with my father has been one of the most amazing things in my life, because now I get to spend time with him every day.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. That's great. Yeah, my dad and I were really cool. We were really close as well, and I think that's great that you get to have that relationship and you get to have, him right there with you, cheering you on. Because I've seen pictures of him and you guys together through social media and whatnot. So that's great that he's supportive and there with you. I love it.
Yeah, you always know that someone else in your organization has got your back. I think especially in small business, you got to have a mole of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
This is I think a huge nugget, and everyone says don't do business with family, but you've got to have someone that's a mole in your business and letting you know where your blind spots are. Like, hey, you're fucking up here, T. Hey, this person said this, or hey, just make sure this person's bought in, or just they can help you navigate, because every now and again you're gonna have some blind spots.
Well, and it's tough because you're seeing things from like a 10,000-foot view, and you're not necessarily at the 100-foot view or side by side with some of the folks, right? And so something that maybe you say or you do, you think it is interpreted one way, but it's not. It's interpreted a completely different way, and it starts to impact the morale or the culture that you're trying to create negatively. And so, yeah, to be able to have somebody kind of, in with everybody else, or at a lower, not, I wouldn't say a lower level, but have a different viewpoint than you do, to be able to, and that you can trust, right? Because that's the big thing is if he tells it to you, it's one thing. If somebody else that works with you mentions it to you, at least the way that I am, I'm kind of like, well, like,
I believe him. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to be able to have that, that's great. What do you think is, so you said you and your dad kind of became entrepreneurs together. Like, what do you think one of the biggest, or maybe, or maybe, like one of the biggest fears that you had going from, going from a W-2 employee to entrepreneur, but also as you're scaling and you're achieving different levels of entrepreneurship and business, like, what are some of those things that you've had to kind of overcome? Because I feel like it's always changing, right? As soon as you you reach a certain level, like that 50th house for you is like, yeah, I made, like, this is great. And then all of a sudden you got to keep pushing and keep pushing. So you never really, but the first step that you took, leaving Chase, that's one big fear, right? But then how did you overcome that? And then how do you normally overcome these, I don't know, the fear points or the things that could limit you?
Yeah, for sure. So like the fear point at Chase was that I was going to blow my brains out, to be quite honest. Dude, I'm being dead serious. I was going through the hardest time of my life. I'm sitting in a cubicle, in massive depression, 12 hours, and you're just like looking around. And you're like, damn, man, this sucks. I got to figure out a way. Like, if I didn't do it, I was probably going to off.
Yeah.
So that was my fear back then. Then when you get to a better place in life, your fear becomes, I think for me, it's time. And then you're always thinking of, okay, do you want more of a lifestyle business, or do you want to grow this big monstrosity to pass it down or sell? And so you float. I'm sure we all have this thing where we float back and forth in between it, and it's kind of hard to drive the needle, and build this monstrosity when you want to go to Cancun every other weekend too. I mean, it can be done, but it's difficult to drive culture in a small business and still have that. So my fear now is just being able to spend my time as wisely as possible, because you want to, men like us need to have this legacy piece. We need to have something that we're a part of. And I'm a team guy. I love going into work with my team every day. Like, it's just something I truly enjoy. Maybe it's the fullback in me, I don't know. But I also want to make sure that I'm spending my time wisely with my family, and knowing that, hey, if I push, we get to do more things, making sure we have good experiences, and I don't miss moments, but just making sure I spend every moment wisely. Like, it's especially having this newborn. He's 8 months today. I look at it and I'm like, I don't want to miss anything, but at the same time, I want to make sure that he sees his father growing. I mean, no one wants to see their dad just sitting around like doing nothing, right? They want you want to be that guy that's pushing and doing more and being better in all ways in the eyes of your kids. So that's my fear now, and overcoming it. That's the struggle, right? Making sure you're spending your time wisely, and
yeah.
So
it's tough. I think it's like you said. I mean, everybody. Well, hey, I appreciate you sharing it, man. Like I said, I think that's something that's interesting too. Like you said, you've got, you get married, you start having kids, like your priorities change too. And I think sometimes that changes the priority even within your business. When you got started, it was just you. Your priority was to scale and grow and have this big thing and make all this money, or I'm just assuming so. That's how it was for me. It was different for me, I guess, because I already had a family when I got started. But but for me, when I got started, I wanted time freedom. I needed to buy my time back. I was working at the firehouse, thousands of hours of overtime a year. I was gone for 6 months, day and night, and I'm like, this is not gonna work. And so I had to change the way that I was doing things. And like you said, you've got a new child. It's like, as these things in life happen, they start to affect your business. And I think, even your priorities are probably different. Maybe before, it was going on trips and doing all these different things was the priority. And as you kind of get married, you start settling down, you have the kids. I don't know, like you said, just the time with them is you can never get that back. And so it alters kind of the priority of, either it alters the priority of the business, I think, or you got to bring in somebody that can kind of be the buffer between you and the craziness that can be the business. I know we just brought in a experienced asset manager to kind of get in between us and the properties or the management staff and the team, because there's times where, like, you're checking out, you want to be home with the family, but yet the business doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And so having a buffer there was a big important thing for Tim and I.
It is important, man. There's a great book I read, probably one of the top 5 books I've ever read in my life, called Die with Zero. This book was a game changer for me. But yeah, I mean, when I first started making money, it was like, hey, man, how like I started a brewery back in the day because I loved craft beer. I'm a huge craft beer nerd. And then I'm like, what dude doesn't want to own a bar and drink with his college buddies and, reminisce about the days you played football and all that stuff. Massive failure, but yeah, your priorities just they change, man. But the whole premise of the book is, your utility of money when you're a 25, 26-year-old kid with no responsibilities, you are way different than the guy that's 78. There's this time, money, and then health, and then when you're middle aged, they all kind of come together where you have time, you have your health still, and you have enough money, and you just want to be able to make sure that you spend them all wisely.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And so let me ask you this, because that kind of, you talking about the brewery kind of spurs a thought to me, is like, as far as business landmines, I mean, I could tell you a list of things like right now that have like almost, I wouldn't say derailed us, but it's like, oh, I thought, oh, this sounds like a great idea. Why don't we start a management company?
Yeah.
Right? Like, we got enough apartments now, like let's start managing these things ourselves so we can control everything. But I had no idea just how much time that would suck up, because when it may be different for you. Like for us, if we go buy an apartment building, you have instant cash flow, you have something that's, you're not really starting a business from scratch, and then you can take it to have somebody else manage it. Well, when we started our management company and even the construction side of things, like that was the first time I had experienced starting something from scratch. And holy cow, it has been a very interesting road and a process. And so like, there's several landmines I could talk about, but like for you,
do you guys still manage those, by the way? Sorry.
Yeah. So we went from managing nothing to about managing almost 500 doors.
Wow.
And the lead person that we hired, thinking that they were going to be like a rock star for us, we didn't realize until about 4 months into it that they were like a spoke in the wheel of a larger company, and the nucleus of that management company was not at the location that they were at. So we went into this thinking, hey, we'll start this thing up. We got great staff. We're gonna hit the ground running. Well, then we hit the ground running for about 3 months, and then it sputtered to an almost standstill, which it can't do that when you're owning a property and you got people living there.
Yeah.
And so it was we've basically had to create something from nothing for the last year and a half, almost 2 years of running our properties, which they've all done great, but we had to bring in the right people, the right players that kind of help speed that learning curve up. So that would be, a landmine for me. And I don't know what are maybe some one or two that you've experienced in your growth or in business that really were like lesson teachers for you.
Yeah, mine was the opposite. So yeah, I mean, I had that brewery. Actually, I started that brewery right after I quit my job. So I bought all these houses, bought like 50 grand worth of brewery equipment, and it's like, yeah, I'm a businessman now. Hey, I can start any business.
Right.
And then every person's like, dude, never get in the bar restaurant industry, never do it. And then I didn't listen, failed miserably, lost a shit ton of money. But lesson learned. But it teach me a lot about scale and time and labor percentage and just all these different metrics that you generally have to look out for in a business. So I don't discount it. I'm not like mad that I did it or anything, but that was definitely a huge landmine, and almost took me under. If I hadn't, like, I made like 350 grand on this one house in 2015. And was able to suck a huge line of credit out of it. Had that not happened, I would have been toast. But another landmine was, during this process, I started buying apartments in 2015, and started with like an 8 unit, got a 16 unit, had a 36 unit, did a 26 unit, did some of these like kind of mid-level units, and I gave it to a management company, and then it got to the point where I'm just stroking them checks.
Mm-hmm.
And by 2018, I'm like, dude, they're like, yeah, you owe us 30 G's this month. I'm like, how?
Mm-hmm.
How's it possible? And they're running this one apartment at like 70% because they, now their operational efficiencies are affecting my income because they, couldn't hire anybody. They couldn't find staff. I'm like, dude, get on Facebook, put out a post that you're hiring. It's not that hard. Go on the Facebook Marketplace, offer more than anybody else. Get on LinkedIn, find someone that's at another company, offer more money. Not that hard. So anyways, I decided to bring the management in-house. And to me, especially with the single family world, it's one of the best things I ever did because I found so many inefficiencies in this whole thing. And even now, like, our staff is trimmed down a lot. And I have found so many things that could be outsourced, or technology, or even just little pieces of the leasing process that don't need to be handled, by a salaried person. That can be outsourced and handled elsewhere. There's so many inefficiencies that you don't need to just take a person and say, hey, do all this stuff. Get some technology in here, get a VA, and they can handle a lot of this crap. So I found a lot of things with the management that have helped us immensely, man. Immensely.
Yeah. And I would just say,
you kind of overcame it.
yeah. And I would say this too, for people that are listening to this, is like the stuff that Terry just said is like, that's what you're paying for, right? If they come to a mastermind that you're putting on, or you're putting on an event at your office where I know you did it for a couple of times, where you're kind of teaching people how you do things like that. To me, the lessons that you talked about at a high level, but you probably dig into that stuff. Like, I'll pay for that, because what it does is it speeds my learning curve up to where, I wish I would have sat down with somebody who had already done what you just said, where you like, hey, I realized that we needed a management, so I brought it in house. Well, what did that look like for you? Because most management companies aren't going to sit down, the head of that company is not going to sit down and talk with you about it. But if I come to you and I'm like, hey, I want to learn how you scaled your management side of things, and I'll pay you for it. There might be somebody within your business, it may not be you, but somebody that's in there that can say, hey, like, I can pay you for that knowledge. And that's where, we talked about masterminds. That's where it's so important to me. When you're getting started, it's hard to wrap your brain around it. Like, I'm paying this guy a couple $1,000s and
all this money.
Right. I'm looking around the room and there's 20 people in here. We all paid $2,000. Like, this is a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
But again, to me, it's like, it's your mindset. You're missing the real reason for being there. You're like, that $2,000 is going to make you $200,000 if you listen to what's being said and you actually apply it. You ask questions, you get involved. Because we've got some folks that we work with that, I'm like, it's like pulling teeth. It's like, I don't even want to do it anymore, because they, not in whole, but with specific people, because I feel like, you're having to pull it out of them. Like, you're paying me to come talk to me, but then when we come and we meet, you're just sitting there.
Yeah.
Like, this is not like, have your money back. I'll go do something else. Like, because
when you start getting a real team underneath, like, you're looking at their time.
Yes.
You're like, okay, well, I want to make sure that you're in the highest level position to succeed. I'm going to pick on one of my guys, and I won't say his name, but he's going to go back and listen to this, or hear me, or hear me say it. But I'm all the time, like, in one of our core values are humility, dependability, team oriented, extra effort, adaptability, and self-improvement. So with that, like, I'm the guy, I'll go and pick up trash. I clean the toilets at the office. Like, it's just to be humble. Right.
Yeah.
And this guy he's willing to go and do whatever. But at the same time, I constantly have to remind him, hey man, you're very, very valuable. I want to make sure you're doing the most valuable activity possible. If there's anything that we can do to either outsource or give to a VA, or, just tighten up the process, I want to be able to tighten up. And if I can go to a mastermind and learn that stuff, dude, how much time did I just save him? Now he makes more money. I make more. Like, it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that's huge. Like you said, you pay a couple $1,000 and you go and you get one or two nuggets like that, and how you can go back and build your team out better, make his life easier. He's making you more money now. The whole, well worth it. So,
it's like willing to do whatever it takes, but still understanding and realizing we have to grow and be as efficient as possible too.
Yeah. Have you struggled with, like, I have a partner, and Tim is great because he focuses on, like, I would call him, it's kind of like if you were in retail or you're in restaurant, right? So back of the house, front of the house, right? I'm like the front of the house guy, where I like talking to investors, talking to people, doing that. He's back of the house, making sure that, your food is made correctly, that it's out on time, that it's all the right, all the things are good. If anybody's listening and you've been in a restaurant, you know what I'm saying. The guy that runs the back of the house is not going to be the guy that comes out and talks to you about your customer service problem, and you wouldn't probably want him to. And, like, do you have somebody like that with you? I know I don't think that you have any partners in the business, but as far as your team goes, like, how have you built your team out? Do you have key players? Like, have you defined those roles? Like, what did that look like from you going from just Tarry Summers to the team that you have now?
Yeah.
Did you learn some of that through masterminds?
For sure, man. Yeah. And like, you can't go right in and just have like a COO, right? You have to have enough revenue, and you got to have, all these different things in play. Like our staff accountant, for instance, He is tremendous at, like, for instance, customer service, solving problems, some of the things that I'm not great at. And so we both lean on each other on some of those things. Our sales director, Keenan, he's terrific when it comes to B2B sales. When it comes to like our investors or people in our education system, or even like I'll get completely sick of these wholesalers sometimes. And I'm like, dude, they think they are, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, dude, let me handle it. I got this. This is why I'm in the position I'm in. And he kind of like becomes that buffer between, hey, Terry's doing this and blah, blah, blah. And hey, we still need to buy deals from you. So, but yeah, man. And so you learn to find those people, you identify your core values, and you got to realize that, hey, I can't do everything. And you lean on the people that can do the other things you're not great at. And, just hope that, you bring them in as much as possible and pay them as good as possible. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one thing that that you learn. It can be a hard lesson to learn, or for me, being a blue collar guy in the background I came from, is like letting go and realizing that somebody doing the job 80% or 75% as good as you think you could do it is still better than you having to do it, because there's so much work to go around that, like when I did my first apartment complex, I was there doing all the work, like you said, with your house. I mean, that was the plan. And then we had 15 people move out in like a week. And I'm like, well, that plan went out the window. And then I called Jack Petrick, which I think, Jack, and Jack's like, man, you don't have enough money and you got to do this and you got to do that. So I scrambled to try to do exactly what he told me. But that was something that I was forced to learn then, was like, I could not be the guy doing drywall and putting in flooring and doing all those different things. And, you look at it now and it's the same thing, where it's just scaled up, where what's my highest and best use of time, and anything else that comes to me that doesn't fit in that box, I've got to either give it to somebody else, or I've got to find somebody, and we got to hire them, whether it's a VA or somebody, like you said, outsource it or whatever. And so that is also something I think that people struggle to learn as they're trying to grow, right? I mean, if you have 5 rental properties, you're probably getting close to your max bandwidth as far as what you can handle as one individual. We called it span of control in the fire service, but like for us, it was 3 to 5 people is what you could oversee as a supervisor in these different situations we'd be in. And outside of that, you have to like segregate it and give it to a different officer, and then they would oversee it. And so it's transcended for us for business. But if you never had the training that I've had, you're learning it from the ground up, which, like you said, it sounds like masterminds and just probably, I would say, true grit and just making yourself learn it, right? And mistakes that you've made have been pivotal in you achieving what you have.
Yeah, dude, and I'll say this. I'm a huge fan of trying to learn everything just one time, or at least just be around it one time. Like I know people that don't even like know how to pull a profit and loss statement out of their QuickBooks, and they've got, God knows how many units. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, dude, I love going through like a P&L, breaking things down, going through our balance sheet, inputting on the PFS, making sure everything's good. Like, but you got to learn how to do stuff one time. I'm not saying you got to learn how to hang drywall, but you got to learn how to do most of the tasks. Just learn how to do it one time. So then that way you can see that other people are better, and then you understand what it takes to be able to accomplish those tasks. I'm a huge proponent of that, but I'm a blue collar guy too, man. I believe that, you should at least have working knowledge of different tasks within your business, or else that's a blind spot.
For sure.
You can get blindsided on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that, and one book that I read, Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, man, that book it changed my life. I mean, it finally gave me the permission that I subconsciously needed to allow people to come in and do some of the stuff for me that I had always just felt like I had to do, but I got spread so thin that I started failing at, instead of, you're spread out so much that I just started doing bad at a bunch of different little things where I had to just give some stuff away. That book really opened my eyes to that. So, well, awesome, man. Like I said, I appreciate your time. I know it's valuable, and you jumped on for 45 minutes or so, and I don't want to take any more of it, but I really appreciate connecting with you finally, discussing this stuff. Like I said, I applaud you on your growth and what you've done, man. And like I said, we may not have met yet, but I've been watching for a while, and I love seeing the stuff that you're doing and how you're putting stuff out there.
Seth, I'll leave it at this. You too, my man. You too.
Absolutely. All right. Have a great day.
You too, man. See you.
See ya.